sponsored by Roman. On the night of February 18, 1942, the largest submarine in the world disappeared, some 70 nautical miles from the coast of Panama. This marvel of engineering, designated as a cruiser submarine, was the pride of the French Navy. It had twin 203mm cannons, multiple anti-aircraft guns, 12 torpedo tubes, and its own aircraft hangar. This was to be the first combat deployment in the Pacific, however, it turned out to be its last. There are many theories throughout the years explaining what happened to the submarine, but to this day, the story stays shrouded in a veil of mystery. And just like the sinking of the sub, so too vanished the idea of battleship submarines, some that would still today dwarf modern creations. So hop aboard and let's dive deep into the story of the most interesting submarine in history, the French Surcouf. In World War I, the Germans decimated British supply lines with their submarine fleet. Other countries quickly understood the importance of such vessels and how naval doctrine was forever changed by this new threat under the seas. After investing serious funds into the creation of their own submarine fleet, the French decided to push forward with the daring concept of hybrid vessels, which could provide serious firepower of a cruiser and the ability for a surprise attack, which at the time only a submarine could provide. There were two types of goals behind the French decision to make the Surcouf submarine cruiser. The first were the geopolitical goals. One needs to remember that France still had a large empire that spanned 4 continents leading up to World War II, and the French were determined to protect those interests. The only way to do it effectively was with a strong and flexible navy. Second were the military goals. Its principal purpose was to search and destroy enemy fleets in collaboration with its own fleet, a sort of weapon that would spearhead the assault or surprise the enemy fleet from behind, whilst the supporting ships would wreak havoc from a distance. Another purpose was to engage in the active pursuit of enemy convoys on the open seas, something just like what the Germans did with their U-boats in World War I and the famous Wolf Pack tactics in World War II. So it was in 1927 that the decision was made and a green light was given for the development of a new submarine class. Being in the Navy is hard. Being in a submarine is harder, and being a submariner in World War II is the hardest, something that many men today lack from the open sea to the bedroom. That's right, erectile dysfunction, or ED, affects people differently, but it's actually something that 52% of men will experience. And if that sounds like something that you have dealt with, I recommend calling in reinforcements with today's sponsor, Roman. Roman can connect you directly with a licensed US healthcare professional for a free telehealth consultation from the privacy of your own home. If appropriate, the provider will find the treatment that's right for you and prescribe effective medication. The whole process is honestly super simple, so if you think this is something that will help you, you can head to getroman.com/found and find out if this is the right treatment for you. Oh, and by using this link, you'll get $15 off your first month of ED treatment, which benefits us both for supporting the channel and keeping your Navy strong. So go to getroman.com/found, lock those torpedo tubes, and you and your partner can once again say, land ho. Turning a battleship or a cruiser into a submarine was not a new idea after World War I. The United States, for one, pushed forward with several designs for a submarine concept that could go toe-to-toe with battleships. In 1920, Chief Constructor Rear Admiral David Taylor pitched 4 different concepts. The first, simply labelled as Type 1, featured 8 8-inch cannons over 3 turrets and a hangar for 4 planes, but no armour, and if the plane hangars flooded, it would sink like a stone. Type 2 fixed the armour problem on top, but didn't make it immune to torpedoes. The extra weight also slowed it down. Type 3 was the most solid, with more armor below the waterline to defend against all sorts of torpedoes, but at a cost of weapons and aircraft. It was slow, heavy, and very expensive, not ideal for something that would be hunted by enemy submarines and aircraft. The last design, the Type 4, was focused on speed and removed the flooding problem. With light weapons and armor, it would have been less of a battleship and more of a cruiser, just like its European counterpart. But testing these concepts found them to be vulnerable to both other submarines and aircraft, and even slower in deploying weapons in its onboard planes. All of these designs are listed from our friend at Aerospace Projects Review, which you can check out after this video with a link down in the description. The concept, for America at least, didn't go anywhere, but the French found a way around these problems and went full steam ahead. Building the Surcouf took 7 years before it was finally put into service in May 1934. It was undoubtedly the largest submarine of its day, courtesy of being 110 meters in length and having a surface weight of 3,304 tons. Being so large meant that the submarine could accommodate a crew of 8 officers and 110 men on board. Its interior also contained a cargo compartment that could hold 40 prisoners or lodge 40 passengers. For comparison, the most famous German submarine of World War II, the Type 7, was 67 meters long and had less than half the crew of the Surcouf. Size would also allow this beast to carry enough supplies for up to 10,000 nautical miles, or 90 days underwater. Its propulsion was provided by 2 diesel engines and 2 electric engines. It could attain a top speed of 18.5 knots, which is 34 km per hour on the surface, and 10 knots, the equivalent of 19 km per hour when underwater. But the thing that truly set this submarine as a class of its own were the weapons. The Surcouf would house a twin-gun pressure-tight turret in the front of the conning tower, equipped with 203mm guns. These were alike in caliber to the guns of a heavy cruiser. Each gun had a 60-round magazine capacity and could fire 5 to 6 rounds per minute. The ammo was actually stored in a lift well underneath the turret and brought up during engagements. The vessel was also equipped with a hangar and a Marcel Besson MB411 float plane. The float plane would be used for scouting targets for the guns, and this is very important because the guns on the submarine themselves had their rangefinders positioned too close to the water's surface, and as the submarine itself sat so low in the water compared to a combat ship, the float plane was needed to be an observer and provide the important information for the gunners. Further firepower was provided by anti-air cannons and machine guns for protection against anti-submarine aircraft. It had 2 37mm anti-aircraft cannons and 4 13.2mm anti-aircraft machine guns mounted on top of the hangar. The Surcouf was also equipped with 12 torpedo tubes, 8 of which were 550mm and 4 which were 400mm tubes, with an innovative solution to rotate the middle torpedo tubes, allowing almost 360-degree launch capability. However, all of this didn't come without a bunch of issues. The Surcouf was a sluggish vessel, taking 2 minutes to dive to a depth of just 12 meters. This made the French sub very vulnerable to enemy aircraft, made worse by the fact it had no form of radar on board. The guns couldn't be used when the sub's roll was more than 8 degrees, and it was almost ineffective for combat during harsh seas or night because the fall of the shot couldn't be observed. But enough about the stats, let's move on to the story of its life and its tragic deployment. Surcouf may have lived a relatively short life, but she sure had an interesting history. Things came to a head in 1940 when Nazi Germany invaded France, and the French capitulated to the Nazis and formed the puppet Vichy government. Britain was terrified that the French fleet would be seized by the Germans, and so Operation Catapult was launched, in which the British created a naval blockade of French harbours and gave the French an ultimatum: either be destroyed or join the fight against the Germans. Luckily for the Surcouf, it happened to be moored in Plymouth on England's south coast at the time, and so the British simply sequestered the French sub, but not without a tragic loss of life. 3 British and 1 Frenchman were killed during the scuffle. Still, the Surcouf was spared an early sinking. Now under British control, the sub was sent to the Royal Navy's Canadian base at Halifax, Nova Scotia, with its task to aid in the escorting of transatlantic convoys between North America and Britain. The British agreed that the submarine could be brought back under the control of the anti-Vichy pro-Allied Free France, or the French Libéré Group, which was led by General Charles de Gaulle, who would later become the president of post-war France. In a thrilling sidebar, the Surcouf was used to liberate the French island of Saint-Pierre and Miquelon from the Vichy control in December 1941. Pardon my French there. If you think I've done a good job so far with the pronunciations, then don't forget to leave a comment down below. The island was strategically very important for the Allies as it lies a mere 12 miles off the east coast of Canada, and even today it still remains a French overseas territory. So the year was 1942, the wonder weapon was back in French hands and ready to change the fate of history. But this is where the story of the Surcouf takes a sharp dive. The Free France leadership decided in early 1942 that the Surcouf was to be used in the war in the Pacific. She left Halifax and was refitted on the British Caribbean island of Bermuda before being bound for the Panama Canal en route to Tahiti. However, the Surcouf vanished with all hands on deck of the night of the 18th or 19th of February 1942, approximately 70 nautical miles north of Panama. What happened to the French submarine remains shrouded in controversy to this day. The Americans at the time reported that its disappearance was due to an accidental collision with the American freighter ship, the Thompson Lakes. The crew on board the American ship claimed they hit something and assumed it was a German U-boat. However, observers were quoted as saying that the damage to the Thompson Lakes was minor when the American freighter was put into the dry dock some days later. It did not appear to be indicative of damage that would have occurred from ramming such a large vessel such as the Surcouf. However, it couldn't have been a German U-boat either that was struck, since no U-boats were tracked in that area of the Caribbean on that night, nor did the Germans ever record the loss of a U-boat in that part of the Caribbean years later. If so, what are the alternatives of what happened to the Surcouf? A popular theory at the time was the French submarine was actually caught betraying the alliance by refueling a German U-boat and was sunk by either an American submarine or aircraft. This seems highly unlikely given that the Free France leadership, which had direct control over the submarine, was completely anti-Nazi. After all, that's why Free France leaders were in exile in London. Other conspiracy theories surround the Surcouf as that it disappeared due to being another casualty of the notorious and so-called Bermuda Triangle. There was even talk that the legendary French oceanographer Jacques Cousteau had fact found the wreck, although no wreck site has ever been officially declared to date. An odd aside is that the demise of the Surcouf was only announced by the Free French headquarters in London on April 18, 1942, 2 months after it had happened. Why was there such a delay in announcing the sinking of this vessel? That fact only fuels the conspiracy theorists. And just to add one more little spark to the fire, a later French inquiry into the Surcouf's demise concluded that the submarine had been sunk due to American friendly fire, confirming the previously mentioned betrayal theory. Whatever may have happened on that night back in February 1942 out in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, the sinking of the largest submarine in the world at the time, the Surcouf, resulted in the loss of 130 men on board. It would be another 2 years before the Japanese launched an even larger submarine, the I-400, that also happened to be an aircraft carrier. Let me know down in the comments if you would like a topic on this video as well. Today, a monument in the port of Cherbourg in Normandy, France, commemorates the loss of the Surcouf. It's a fitting place given that that was where the submarine, the Pride of France, was built and birthed before the outbreak of World War II. If you want to watch another long video about the world's largest planned submarines, submarine aircraft carriers, then I have it right here on the channel and you can go watch right now. And special thanks again to Aerospace Projects Review for helping out with the other battleship submarine ideas and my Patreons. If you would want to become a patron or Patreon or however you want to say it, then you can click the link down below where you get to see videos early, help choose the next videos on the channel, and speak with me directly. Thanks again so much for watching.